ladies and gentlemen, whatever time you're tuning in the program called What's Going on the new allpointstv.com network. We have left our past destination and gone on to Glory here, and we're now at a different site. I hope you will stay tuned to our developing turn of events here at the studio. We're in the same location, we just simply have changed the network that we are operating from, and we continue to strive toward the excellence that you have come to expect from us here at this site. I am always glad to have you out there, and I'm always honored by your presence because we know you don't have to be here from 2 o'clock to 3 on Mondays, and every second and fourth Mondays here for Satori's Black History Corner that follows this program, coming on at 3:30 and staying around for about 30 minutes every second and fourth Mondays of the month. We're here every Monday without exception until I decide that I need to go abroad to do some studying over in other parts of the world and bring back some things even from that source to make this a more eventful treat for you here on this service. Today, I'm going to continue our discussion that we've had for the last 2 weeks, but I want to first of all start out, rather than starting with the continuation of talking about what will end up being looking at the central bank and the monetary system of the United States. I want to pause just for a minute so as to say a few things about the upcoming election tomorrow, since the 4th will be the day in which we are going to go to the polls, all of us going to the polls, and certainly all the ones who are tuned in to this network will do your citizenship duty, and that's go to the polls and cast a ballot for the candidate of your choice. We don't tell you how to vote here, but we do have some ideas of how the process might be looked at for the greater edification of the nation, and that is to cast a vote with an intent in mind. And I'm going to say a few things that I think might go against the usual fanfare of how we look at the political process, and say a few things I said in my post right before coming to the studio on a part one of a two-part series. It was titled, It's Too Bad That Both Parties Can't Lose. And you would think by what I stated in what is about a 2-page polemic that I posted on Facebook, you would think that I'm advocating not voting for one of the two major parties, but I'm not actually advocating that. In fact, I'm saying at the end of that long narrative that I will be voting for one of the two candidates, and what I have described in the writing as parties, both of which are vulgar. I find both parties to be vulgar, and a thousand plagues upon each of their houses. So then, how can I justify having said that, that I will be tomorrow? I'll be there at 7 o'clock in the morning. I'm gonna be the first. I'm gonna be the first one in line tomorrow morning. Polls open at 7 o'clock. I'll be there at 6:59. So when they open the polls, I don't know if I'll be the first voter, because a lot of persons will be at the polls, no doubt, to cast their ballot before they go to work. But I will be there before the polls open to cast my ballot at 7 o'clock, and I will be casting it for one of the two quote-unquote vulgar parties. I find both of them to be vulgar parties. And the question comes up with my scathing analysis that I put on Facebook before I arrived here, then how can I justify, after saying all the things that I said, and I was on both of their houses, the plague on both their houses, how do I justify that? Well, I justified by having a different analysis of how we must, in fact, import ourselves into the political process. I understand the narrative of those who say that you vote for the lesser of two evils in this case, and some say that they vote third party because they do not want to join into that which is obviously doing the country in. And I would admit that does have some credence. I challenge it, though, in terms of it being the ultimate way in which we have to look at the balloting in all elections, though, because my analysis would be that sometimes, in order to cause the vacating of evil, you cannot always do that from the outside. Sometimes you got to go into the evil in order to extricate it from itself and bring a different arrangement about. So that in that particular setting, with that idea in mind, because I don't think you can always destroy evil from the outside. I think sometimes you have to get inside of it in order to bring about a reconstruction of it. And in the ultimate result, to bring about the end of it. I think sometimes what people look at is that they think that in order to eradicate evil, you can only do it from the outside. And how is that working out for the country? Or voting for a third party that has not been involved in the implications that we are now looking at, from which evil has been perched, creating implicit understandings and arrangements and political machinations that are in place that are caused by the evil that is particularly in Washington, where I have gone so far as to say I don't think there's any representation in Washington. I don't think we count. I don't think they take our existence as real until it's time for the next election. And we are, in this country, dismissed as a political, entity. They only use us as voting stock. But that be that as it may, we have to respond to it in ways that are designed to change that result and change the political outcome. And sometimes doing things that might seem like it is a response is actually aiding the evil that we want to bring to an end. I mean, for example, sometimes you go outside the process of the two major parties and you think that because you're not voting for either one of the two parties and you're not participating in the evil they're in, you are participating in it because you're prolonging it. And the prolongation of it is that what you are doing is by simply going outside of where the evil is constructed, you are aiding and abetting it, because what you're doing on the sideline and the peripheral level, you are actually aiding and abetting it, because the outsider status and role you're playing helps to continue it. I'm trying to end it. And so I'm going to give you a different way of looking at it, hopefully, in these few minutes we're going to deal with this, because this is not my primary topic today. I do want to continue our discussion that we've had for the last 2 weeks. But I want to say a few words about what is happening right now. I want to talk about the past, but I do not want to abandon what's happening in the present. And this election is very important. So what I'm going to be writing about in part 2 tomorrow, and what I put on Facebook today in part 1, is a different way of looking at this conversation. I mean, I hear people like Ben Carson, for example, and some of the others that are saying, don't quote unquote throw your vote away by voting for a third party. Well, you don't throw your vote away by casting for a third party. You don't throw a vote away by casting it in the election. That's impossible to do. And we need to stop saying that votes are thrown away when you vote for a candidate of your choice, because I mean that's a personal decision that you make. What I would contend is that the problem is not quote unquote throwing a vote away. The problem is that that voting does not have in back of it a strategy. In other words, a strategy should be used as a political weapon, and it's the only nonviolent weapon we have. Otherwise, we got to start thinking about some fish sandwiches. I didn't say fish. Some fisticuffs. I mean, we have to use it as a tool. And there must be a strategy in back of it. And what my strategy is, and what I'm trying to get you to look at in this conversation, both here and on Facebook, is that the vote has to have a strategy. And I'm talking about a strategy here that would be one in which we throw all the rascals out, but you can't throw them all out at the same time. You have to throw some of them out now and throw some of them out later, depending upon the larger view, which is that we've got to stop some stuff that's already in place, in motion, within the governmental apparatus and within the systemic things that are occurring in this country, carried out by these politicians who are sitting up there in Washington doing the country in. I mean, let's face it, we have got to stop some things. Sometimes you've got to do a bit of deconstruction before you can do the reconstruction. And the deconstruction process has to take into account those who are inside of the network. And you can't remove all of them at the same time. You've got to have a strategy in terms of how you bring about the removal, because you're leaving some people in place. In fact, only 1/3 of the senators up for re-election tomorrow in this midterm election. It's a little bit more than that, because you have 6 seats to be filled by those who are finally, retiring and getting out of the mix. Some stepping down, belatedly, I must say, in most cases, because they think they're supposed to stay in power until they fall over at their desks. Those who've been in there more than a certain number of years, I'm talking here in terms of decades, they're senile. And I don't mean that they're necessarily forgetful of why they're sitting in those chairs. They're senile in the sense they don't have any ideas to offer other than what's already been offered on the table. That's why they all sound like the same pairs they sounded like 10 years ago. Those have been up there for decades and decades and decades, and should be thrown out. But they must be. Their perch must be rescinded based upon a strategy of how you bring about that. So normally 33 would be up for election in the Senate, but it's 39 this time because of some intending situations that have prevailed based upon some senatorial positions got to be filled because of persons not being in the office. But normally, it normally be 33, 39 in this case. And that would be 1/3 normally of those that are in the Senate. So it's every 2 years we have 33 or 34 senators up for re-election by the processes that's in place, so that we don't have the whole Senate going up before the voters as we do in the House of Representatives. And the intent of that was, of course, because the Senate was supposed to be the state's representatives, and the people's representatives will go before the people every 2 years, which was intended in the House of Representatives. That has not been altered, so we still have that process in place. But in the Senate, it was altered in 1913. We brought about the 17th Amendment and how we elect senators in this country, not understanding what the framers had in mind. And so we then subject our senators now, which was never intended by the framers, to elect our senators by popular vote, which was a Herculean change in the political process, and it really is the reason why, some of the reason why we have so many problems right now with what is happening in Washington is because the states don't have any representation in the national body anymore, which was the intent, to have the states represented in Washington by the framers, and their superior wisdom was rescinded by those who had less wisdom than what they had, and now we're paying for that in terms of the kind of government we now see in Washington, where we are dismissed as those in the states, and the states are dismissed and have no voice in terms of what's going on in Washington today. That's why you saw, for example, in Arkansas, where Governor Jan Brewer was trying to believe it or not, enforce the federal law in her state, where you have immigrants who are just crossing the border like it's a 24/7 job assignment, and crossing the borders and bringing all kinds of problems into the country. One of which, as quiet as it's kept, not being covered by the media, is that we have 50 people in this country that have been paralyzed by diseases that have been brought across the border. Everybody talking about Ebola. That's a problem too. And it's a problem that's not being addressed by politicians because they don't care that you want those borders sealed. You want the quarantining of those countries that have this particular disease. They don't care anything about that. And in terms of immigration at large, where they're bringing the diseases across the borders through immigration, they keep trying to make it seem like they're not acting like outlaws, which is what they are, by always throwing out the word reform, which is nothing other than a term that they use to hide the fact that they're not enforcing immigration laws. If you notice that they always talk about reform, and nothing gets reformed. But what the reform is doing, which is nothing other than political rhetoric, is politicians hiding the fact that they're not willing to take the political consequences of doing that which serves the nation, which is enforce the laws that are on the books. So if you don't like the laws, then change the laws. But as long as the laws are in the books, every politician is sworn to uphold not only the Constitution but the laws of the land. In fact, politicians should only defy the laws that are in contravention of the Constitution. Not all the laws, but any law that is not in fellowship with the Constitution of the United States, which they are sworn to uphold. But they don't uphold any of the laws, quite frankly, that would contravene their running for re-election and getting elected, which is why they can remember us every 2 years and certainly every 4 years, because more persons go to the polls and vote during the 4-year election than they would for that is when the president on the ballot than they would during the midterm election. We should turn out in both, and we should turn out for strategy, and that strategy must be and should be not that I'm trying to tell you how to vote, but I think that what I am trying to tell you without apology here is that the vote must be seen and used as a political weapon. It's the only nonviolent weapon that you have. And I would like to see us use that, because if we don't change some things through the nonviolent weapon, then I'm very fearful that if we continue down this road, you know how you can back a chicken up into a corner, and then you got a problem on your hands. And I think all this backing the American people up into a corner will have a consequence at some point, and that consequence will not be one that would be nonviolent, and certainly not non-consequential to the stability of this nation. And we've gone through a situation, it's called a civil war. We never had a civil war in this country. You had a war over the question of secession. You never had a civil war. A civil war is where you're fighting over a particular group that is vying inside of the political structure, which group, party, segment of the population is going to be in control. We've not had that war in this country. We've had a war over whether or not states dissatisfied with the internal political apparatus have the right to vacate the premises, which they of course did based upon the founding structure of the nation, but it was determined on the battlefield by Abraham Lincoln that they did not have that right. By the way, this was a different view of the Constitution than that was held by his predecessor, James Buchanan, which is why he was hesitating to take any action and was in fact in negotiation with how that particular arrangement would be brought into bearing. And they had Pearsons in Washington, by the way, under Buchanan, that was actually negotiating the departure, which was stopped in its tracks once the next president the 16th president stood up to the plate and through and in typical tyrannical form put a halt to what was the democratic process, where which is really what is alluded to, if I mention the word, in the Declaration of Independence, that whenever a government becomes destructive of the ends for which it was in fact founded, then there's the right, is in fact the duty of the people to alter that government or to abolish it or to abandon it, which is what the 11 Confederate states were trying to do. I will make this side point as well, because I am on Facebook a lot, not as much as people think I'm on Facebook. I'm on there about maybe an hour and a half a day, but I pick and choose my times in which I'm on there. I post my article, then I go off, come back later on that evening, look at what some of the comments are made on it to keep in touch with people that are really bringing the news without it being filtered. And then I go back on it later on at night before I turn in, to just kind of take a snapshot view of everything that's happened during the course of the day, based upon different postings that have occurred by people that read other things than what I read and watch other things than what I watch. And I don't watch any television these days except for various events that I'm targeting. Maybe I'll watch one or two sports programs, and I might tune in something to do with. I might watch. I did watch last night some of the preliminaries about the election coming up, because I'm paying attention to the election outcome, which I think is very pertinent going toward tomorrow's vote. But basically, I've turned the television set off because I have come to understand that I can't get anything other than filtered information that has to be filtered because it's licensed. And anyone that licensed what you can say is actually determining what can be said. And I just don't want to waste my time trying to get to the truth in that which is licensed by the government. So I'm out of here with that. But I do pay attention to what is posted because that's where people are free now for the time being to say what, and that freedom is somewhat held in check because people are aware that what they're posting is being watched. So I mean, I'm not bothered by it myself, but I understand why people would be hesitant in terms of being out there in public identifying themselves, because you're exposing yourselves to risk. And you saw that with what the IRS was doing. So, I mean, you are targeted because of your political views. But we got to end that at some point, and we have to try to do it through the political landscape that we find ourselves in, and try to alter it. And I'm telling you that you can't always do that from the outside. Sometimes you got to go into the evil arena, not because you have given up and thrown your hands up in the air in terms of political surrender, but you do it because sometimes in order to end evil, you have to go into where the evil is in fact housed in order to extricate the process from the hands of those who are his merchants. I mean, the devil is in the details, and sometimes you got to go into where the details are located, with an intention, though, of coming out on the other side, not having abandoned the reason why you went in there. You know, I mean, look, the Tea Party went in there, right? We sent about 87 of these. I don't want to call them what I'm thinking. But they're jerks, you know, I mean, basically. I mean, got in there and got corrupted by the internal disorder and became disorderly themselves. And now they're talking out of both sides of their mouths. I can't even tell Rand Paul was a Tea Party candidate because he sounded more and more like, I don't hear anything in his father in his voice, and he's sounding more and more like the flakes that were up there before he arrived. And he wants to be president, so I'm seeing him talking out of the left side of his mouth. He was talking on the right side of his mouth. Now he's talking on the left side of his mouth. So that's another one I don't have any trust in. But I'm talking about the process, though, in terms of not being corrupted by it. and that's going into the arena, into the lion's den, and not being co-opted by the lion and acting like the lions. In other words, going into the process without being corrupted by it. How many persons can do that? There's got to be somebody that can do that. Just because I don't see it doesn't mean it's not possible. And we don't have a lot of people that understand this. They think that when they go in there, they got to go in there and start compromising with evil. And as Ayn Rand says, and she's absolutely right in this, that whenever evil is compromised by that which is not evil, only evil can win. So I'm not talking about a compromise here. I'm talking about a strategy here. There's something different in compromising with evil and having a strategy to, in fact, combat it. And I'm talking about a strategy. And the strategy is to go inside of the den where the evil is located with the intention of not being corrupted by it, so later on you can do the work that needs to be done from the inside to extricate the evil from the process. And that's something that can be done if we understand the weapon that we have at our hands. And it is a weapon. And I think we have to understand the strategy in terms of how it is to be used. I don't think that third party is a bad idea. But I think that what it does in some cases is that it vacates what really should be in back of the third party emphasis and thrust. And that is, what is the strategy? And I don't want to abandon strategy at this point because the moment in time is too critical. And I'll be writing about that more so tomorrow than I did today. I just tried to introduce it today. But I will be finishing up tomorrow trying to put a analysis in place in public that I don't think, I don't have a hesitancy to say what I think is true. And if the truth causes a negative consequence, then all I can say in that case is bring it on, because I can't stand up there in the public or even in my private life and do that which I don't have any confidence in. I mean, sometimes, really all the time, you have to act upon faith. There is nothing that you can do in this life that doesn't require faith, because faith is built into the universal order. I mean, you can't avoid it. It's universal. It's built into how the universe operates. I think people are watching what I do, and I think that there's a danger zone. So I have faith that I can prevent some of that. There are certain things I do that I do because I take certain precautions, and I have faith those precautions will work. But I'm not at all unmindful of the fact, a lot of facts, and I understand exactly what we have in Washington, and I know it better than most. And certainly more than my friends who believe that they're dealing with the Illuminati. They're not dealing with the Illuminati, they're dealing with the American government. And it is as bad as it looks. And those in power are as devious as they seem, and deceitful, and dangerous. And there are many rooms in it. And you think because they're located in you see a single body there, you think that's the totality of what is in place. Let me tell you something on the QTN running. And this is on the QTN running. we had a president murdered in this country in 1963, November the 22nd, and more than 50 years later, the murderers of the highest office holder in this country, the one that everybody in this country has, he's the only office holder in this country that every legitimate voter in this country can vote for. You don't vote for any other person in this country where the totality of the American people vote for that office holder. He is singular to that process. So that when you murder the President of the United States, you have actually put a dagger in the political heart of every American in this country. That is not true of any other official. And to murder that person and then hide what occurred in the process of that person is a attack upon the American people in its totality, in their totality. And that's ongoing. And that says a lot, all that needs to be said, quite frankly, about the government in Washington, D.C. I understand exactly who they are. And I'm not fooled by the appearance of normalcy. In fact, you know, I have to tell you something that's really a little secret here. There are some people that say you can't judge a book by its cover. That's sometimes true, but it's not always true. I mean, if the book cover is cursing me out, I can pretty much tell what's in that book. I don't have to read the book. I don't say don't read the book, but you can tell. Sometimes you can tell a book by its cover, by what it says on the cover. And many times I find myself reading what others that have said about the book on the inside of the cover. That's the cover too. And I read what they said. And I also see who's saying it. If I see some names on the cover, maybe the inside of the cover, let's say, and I know who those persons are and I'm aware of their writings and what they stand for and the principles that they represent, I pretty much know what's in the book. I haven't read it, but I've looked at the cover, and I pretty much know what's in it. I can tell by the validation of it. And who doesn't validate it? Some names are missing in action. Okay. I can tell in Washington some things about the cover. I mean, I look at Mitch McConnell, and I saw what happened down in Mississippi. In that election down there, where it was stolen from the person who was an insurgent candidate, and that's when the third party would have been really great. There is a time for third parties and third parties coming up, and that was one of the cases there. And the people took advantage of that opportunity, and the incumbent turned back the voice of the American people. That person needs to be. We need third party there. And in Mitch McConnell's case down there in Kentucky, we need third party there also. And I'll tell you this about McConnell, who is a Republican, so I don't want you to think I'm picking on the Democrats. I can look at Mitch McConnell and I can look at John Boehner, and both these men look like sociopaths. You look at McConnell. You know, sometimes, you know, there's so much devil in people that comes out. You know, it don't come out like it comes out like in The Exorcist. You know, you're going to watch these movies where sometimes sometimes it is that. I mean, you can read about that, right? Sometimes it's not that. Sometimes those demons are not extricated from the person. It's all over them and embedded in their faces and their physical appearance. You can see the sickness. You can see the psychological, distortion in the physicality. Isn't that true, psychologists? Yeah, I took a few classes myself. Sometimes you can see the sickness in the physicality. And Mitch McConnell, you can look at this man. And it would be a good thing, in his case, if the Tea Party would use the vote as a strategy and get this man out of there. A man, by the way, that has said out in the open that he intends to destroy the Tea Party. Yeah. It's a weapon, but it's got to be used wisely. And it's not wisely used when you have this comprehensive strategy that's being argued by people like Ben Carson, who I respect as a moral person, but I don't think he has any political understanding. But I respect his moral perch, and if he runs for office, I ain't voting for him. Any person that tells me that he's against the Second Amendment cannot be put in office, because that's another line of defense that you have. I'm not advocating his use. I'm just saying that you cannot take that away, or nothing else will work. So when he came out against the Second Amendment, and he didn't say he was against the Second Amendment, he said that he was for some form of gun control. That's a form of immorality. Because what you're saying there, and you heard it much more so in the case in Trayvon Martin, where they were actually talking about abandoning the stand your ground law. That's what they say out in open. It sounds like it's reasonable, but what it really has underneath it is the right to defend yourself. The stand your ground law is not anything other than the Second Amendment. And everybody has the right to stand their ground. You know why? Because if you do not have the right to stand your ground, you don't have the right to self-defense. And if you don't have, and listen to me close here, if you don't have the right to self-defense, then you have had an adoption of the notion that a person's life and a person's sovereignty should be placed over your own life and over your own sovereignty. And that makes of you, according to Ayn Rand's wonderful view, it makes of you a sacrificial animal. And make you a scapegoat. So that is an immoral premise, and I would not vote for him based on that alone. Let me say something else about the political process. Down in, if you didn't see this, but well, maybe some of you did, because I think if you watch this program, you're pretty, I'm not saying my program is anything bigger than others, but I'm saying that if you watch this program, to me that's a statement that you make. And if you listen to certain radio programs, that's a statement you make. And if you watch certain TV programs, that's a statement you make. If you watch, I have some people in my dentist's office. They said to me, well, they don't say it anymore, because I had to let them know that you're not talking to the choir here. But they were telling me about how they watch MSNBC. And they thought, because that's the station over there where you have the morons that go along with the protons and the electrons and neutrons, so that's where the morons are, that they thought that's where the club is, right? So, so they thought that's where the herd is, so that's where I was. And I told them I don't watch that network ever. I watch whatever they may post about it. I will read that, but watching it, don't waste time doing it. And so they mentioned that, and I told them that that's not what I do. And I don't really watch Fox, although I will be if I got to watch a station, I watch that station above the others because at least they try to get it right by putting the other side on there, so you can at least have a debate. The other networks just want to give you the truth as they see it, based upon their filtered point of worldview, and they don't want to give you the other side. Here is the truth. Here's the way we see it, and take this down and write this down. Nothing else is actually said from those other point of view. So I cannot watch that because nobody has a monopoly on the truth, and there's always another side to how things can be seen. And I want to see as many views of it as I can, so that I can look at it from different sides to come to the most reasoned position. That means more information, not less. But I was watching, and I was really looking. I was watching it on video more than anything else. Some comments made by Hillary Clinton, and the comment she made 2 weeks ago in Massachusetts, in my point of view, and it disqualifies her for ever being president of the United States. Certainly in 2016, just by the comment she made in Massachusetts. She said that that don't believe that raising the minimum wage will in fact create unemployment. And she said they always say that. Well, I find that to be profane, by the way, coming from a politician. Because you see, what that comment is made by Hillary Clinton is the view that decision ought to be made by politicians. Now, it is true that raising the minimum wage will not necessarily lead to measurable unemployment, but that's only true if it's made in the market. It will never not be true when it's made by politicians. The market must determine that decision. But she wasn't talking as a person that believed in the market forces, because she said beyond that outrageous comment that she also denies that corporations and businesses create jobs. She said that don't let anybody tell you that.
I'd like to ask her. When I heard she said that, I was like, these people, these guys, these politicians, especially the Democrat ilk, they think they're the ones be driving the economy. They really think that. I mean, when the hell's the last time?
You're a psychopath.
When's the last time anybody sat around saying, you know, I really want something government created? I mean, you're forced into it. You gotta go buy a license. You gotta go get a permit for something. Mm-hmm. You gotta pay a tax for something. Nobody wants what they ever have to offer.
Right.
I mean, nobody.
Government is forced.
Except for it's a handout. I mean, everybody wants a handout, but I mean,
John, whenever you have government involved, there's always force, because there's always, when government arrives on the scene, there's always a gun in the room. The gun is hidden, but doesn't mean it's no less present. Because government is always going to be force. I mean, that's what George Washington was talking about, and he was exactly right in saying that. So whenever force is brought upon the scene, in any particular conversations where decisions have to be made, and government ends up making them, there will always be a cost attached to it, because the decision is not made by two players of equal force, which really is not force, but a decision that be made by common agreements. For example, when you have an employer and an employee that are sitting down and they are negotiating with each other, both of them are making a determination of what they will sell for without force. And I mean, neither one has a gun, because the state has a monopoly on the use of force. And any use of force is not, any initiation of the use of force that's not initiated by the state is illegal. So they can't initiate force legally, so they have to come to an understanding of what they can agree upon based upon what each of the two players can afford to sell upon. The employer can only make this particular concession and maintain his business options, and they can, and the other side is only willing to accept this based upon what would be necessary to satisfy the needs on the other side. But they don't have an agreement to both voluntarily come to an understanding of what the agreement will be. Neither one can actually force it upon the persons. And when they force it upon the persons in the market, then at one point the other player will decide of another option, because that is not agreeable, that to use force. For example, striking and shutting the place down and things of that sort. The agreement will therefore then bear out another reaction to deal with the force that was used illicitly in the arrangement, because it should be both parties coming away with an agreement that benefits both parties. And when one of them abandons that, then you have another thing added to the mix, through which there will be a response to it. There'll be no response when government does it. When government says that you'll raise the minimum wage, that is what's going to happen. And those down in places like Detroit and other places where you have a high unemployment rate among the youth in the urban areas, the reason why that happens is because of the government making it illegal to hire you. In other words, when the reason why the unemployment rate goes up when you have the minimum wage laws that are raised by, when minimum wage is raised by legal fiat, is because the government has made it illegal to hire anybody underneath that wage. In other words, if anybody hires you underneath the wage or pay you a wage that your credentials will probably be at that level, let's say you'll drop out of school, for example, on the minimum wage job, you never get on the minimum wage laws, you never get a job. Because at the level in which your skills are, the government has said to hire you at that skill level, the person who hires you goes to jail. That's what minimum wage laws mean. And it's hidden because you're not supposed to see that aspect to it. And this time they're taking about. Anyway, Hillary Clinton was saying, and I find it very obscene for her to say that don't let anybody tell you that minimum wage jobs, minimum wage laws cause job loss. That which is absurd. But the problem is she sees that you can suspend economic laws through government fiat. And that's an outrageous assumption. In fact, it's an assumption it's a Marxist-Leninist assumption. And you didn't just hear that from her, you heard that from the President of the United States. Or Saul Alinsky Light, who on July the 13th, 2012, go check that date out, this president said on that particular date, July 13, 2012, he said that those persons that's out there that built businesses, you didn't build that. There were roads and bridges, and the idea he was trying to put across, the government built it. Let me see government build anything without, let me see the government build roads and bridges without businesses and corporations and those who create wealth providing the wealth for the government to do that. Let me see the government do it on its own. Let me see it pretty soon, as a matter of fact, because I think what's getting ready to happen in this country, quite frankly, and we see it by the disavowing of citizenship in this country, I think we're getting ready to see on a massive level Atlas shrugging again, but this time in a much more in a much more total way than what has already occurred. I mean, we already see them, going abroad, and which is called unpatriotic by these politicians. And what the lack of patriotism is in these regulations. That is backing these businesses up into a corner where, because of government force, they're not able to come out and fight. So what they're doing is picking up in whole units and leaving. That's what they're doing, because you can't fight. You can fight City Hall, but you can't fight City Hall using City Hall's weapons. Not at least in piecemeal. That takes the people to do. As you're seeing right now in, what's that country that they told, what's that country has a combined name, used to be the Volta. It's a combined name when they became independent, because they had the take the two ethnic groups and combine the name, one group's word for the country's name, another ethnic group word in the country's name, so as to be able to satisfy the ethnic tensions in the nation. What's that name? Burkina Faso. I had to think. I was talking myself through it. I knew I would. Yeah, the president is now in another. Ran out of the country. I'm not saying we should do that here, but the person would run out of the country because he wouldn't leave, and 21 years of his nonsense, they rose up against him. So we're not going to do that here. But I mean, you know, I hope it doesn't come to that. Is what I'm saying, because one thing we do here in this country, and this is the good thing, is that we do have people leaving office if they can't, at least if they can't steal the election. I mean, if the vote is told and the person doesn't have the vote total, at least you can say they will leave. Because you know why? Because that's too much in your face. And you wouldn't tolerate that. So they will leave under those circumstances. Now, what goes on before that, you might see what happens in Chicago, where you go in there and they pull the ballot, and the guy showed, one guy went to vote for himself. Only to find out that when he said, I want to check just what happened there, and found out the guy went to the poll, can you believe this, and voted against himself. That's the first, folks. I mean, it wasn't the first in terms of how you got voting machines, so, I mean, what does that mean? But he went to, that happened in a number of states. Went to the poll and pulled the lever. Or, you put your ballot, here in this state, you're not pulling the lever. This is not the slot machine. This is another kind of machine. It's a voting machine. So you slide your ballot in there, and it's been calibrated. This can't be accidental, not in all the states I've seen it happen in. It's calibrated, so you roll it in there, and they calibrated they know how you feel, so they calibrated the machine so that the opposite of your intention is registered. That's why you can get people voted. That's why Romney had in 2012 in some places 100% of the vote went against him. He was not getting not only the votes that were cast for the other candidate, but he was not even getting the votes that were cast for him. And you've seen that happen in some occasions here in the country. At least though in America, it's not gotten to the point where if the tally, if you're watching at the poll and you're over there, you're watching, you're paying attention, and the vote is in fact tallied, and the next day it shows that they got to leave, they will leave. Give them credit for that. So at least they're not, they're not totally, willing. I'll give them this credit, at least this much. They're not willing to come out and come from behind the mask, as did Ms. Clinton when she was talking about businesses don't create jobs. Well, Ms. Clinton, if businesses and the corporation don't create jobs, then who may I ask if I raise my hand and put my hand on the Bible, who, if they don't create jobs, then what's left? And I know what you are saying, but you're not going to say that in public because you got caught and you had to back up and say that you didn't really say as definitively what you intended, which was that you were really saying government creates jobs. And if that's not Saul Alinsky, then he never lived. And if that's not Karl Marx, then he didn't write this book in 1848. But that's what was being said here. But the mask was down at that point. It went back up in terms of the disclaimer later on when she recognized how she had exposed herself. And that's exposure that, that's a genie out of the bottle. We're going to see what you do with it. Well, I came here to talk about something else, but, the election this is now and that can be later. But right now, let's get real here, folks. What's it gonna be tomorrow when we go in that ballot box? Go in for balloting. I'll be there 6:59, so you can expect me there, and I'm gonna check. When you push that thing in that machine, I want to see what it registered. I would like to see everybody do that. You know, if I see anybody in there that, and at my polling station, knock on wood for this one, they require a voting ID. Now, I'm going to appeal to your best imagination. Why are we being sold the idea? This is a multiple choice question. Why are we being told, you think, why a voting ID is prohibitive of voting? Now, don't forget, we have all these persons that have broken into the country, and all those persons are Democrats. These are the ones that's not dead. And all of a sudden, getting an ID is prohibitive. And that is an unbelievable insult to the American people that we are so lame and we have so little agency that we just can't go and get an ID with our picture on it, which everything in the country that is official outside of voting requires an ID. Everything that's official requires it. When inside of the official network, they give you a check and you want to deposit the check. You don't want any money out of the account. You just want to put the check in the account. They still want to see who you are. And don't even think about going into an official place where money is housed and think you're going to take any money out of the account without an ID, because if they give you my money or your money, you want an accounting for that. And they don't want to be held liable for it, so they're going to require an ID because they're on the dime for giving out money that don't belong to them to a person it doesn't belong to. They're not going to do that. They're going to require you to show some kind of identification. They don't want you to, putting your hand in the Bible and swearing that's you. And it ain't just them, that's everybody. So all of a sudden, and I mean, this multiple choice question, they are saying that you can vote based upon your word of honor. And they think that having an ID is prohibitive. Now, do they believe that? You think, okay, here's a multiple choice question. A, they believe that. B, they don't believe it. C, they're lying. D, both B and C. Okay, okay, what's the answer? All right. You see how smart you are? Didn't pull any wool over your eyes. Okay, so now we're going to go to the poll tomorrow. We understand the need for a strategy, and the strategy is this, finally. The strategy is to go in to purge the evildoers, and that's all of them, but some now and some later. Because you know what the real problem is in America? I mean, it's a lot of problems, but you know what the main problem is in America? The main problem is incumbency. I know you think it's the political party, and you're a dyed-in-the-wool Democrat or you're a dyed-in-the-wool Republican. I'm not a dyed-in-the-wool anything. I think everybody needs to be an independent, and that don't mean you don't vote for Democrats and Republicans. It means that you can be a Democrat or Republican without being a dyed-in-the-wool Democrat and Republican, and target your vote and have a strategy going into the polls. So tomorrow I'm going to the poll, and I'll be very specific about targeting certain individuals so that those persons will know that we're not all out here drinking their Kool-Aid. And I like to see it. And I know we got a person running in Carl Rowan's seat. I'm not Carl Rowan. What am I saying? Carl Rowan. That was a news person. Carl Levin, who's been in that seat for 58 years. I don't think there's anybody on God's green, earth that has enough information that it can't be gotten out of in less than 58 years. That's just me. And those persons up there like Boehner, 30-some years, I just don't think you have that. I just don't think you know that much. And let me say this, we're running out of time, but in terms of Obama's case, I'm willing to concede that he went to some of the top universities. I'm not gonna argue with that. I don't have no proof of it, but I'm not gonna argue with that. What I will argue with you is that he went to class. And if he did go to class, I would even say this: there's absolutely no evidence of it, because there's no evidence that he's an expert on anything in any field. You can feel me on that or challenge it, and I'm going to ask you for your proof. But tomorrow we go to the polls, folks, and we go there hopefully with an intention in mind. And in terms of Levin's position, since he finally decided after 58 years to stand down from the tyranny, because Levin is a hidden tyrant. You can't see it because you just keep putting them up there. But that's what you have here, hidden tyrants who won't leave power. In Levin's case, been in there longer than the Castro brothers combined, who've only been in power for 55 years, and Levin was in there 58 years. Doing what? Not bringing in new ideas to the table. You don't have that much information in anybody's brain. So we know what that's about. Holding on to power, just like tyrants do. And hidden tyrants do it through the ballot box and will not leave until you throw them out. But he stepped down after 58 years. Well, in the case of Terry Lynn and what's the guy's name running against her? Is it Rogers? I'll see it tomorrow on the ballot box. I'm not impressed with either one of them, but anybody that plays the class card is going out. It's as simple as that. And so I'm going to be casting a ballot in that election, but I'm doing it with the idea in mind that the vote is a defensive measure. It is a political measure. It's a political weapon that's be used and it's be targeted. So some incumbents going out because of the gravity of the situation. Some of the non-incumbents shouldn't go in because of their situation, and some of the ones who've gotten in there through ill-gotten gains, like that guy down in Mississippi, should be targeted, even though he's running in the Republican Party. So I'm disagreeing with Ann Coulter here in that case. Okay, I've got to get out of here. They're telling me that John's going to start sawing his neck off. When I start seeing him do this right here, that means I got to get out of here before John saws his neck off. Okay, folks, until next week, we will, in fact, get back to our conversation next week. Until that time, I want you to follow your dream, because if you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.